Thomas and Uma are lifelong supporters of a major political party in their country. After 5 years together, they have their first child, Ben. They invite their friends and family to a ceremony where the baby's hand is painted in the party colour and pressed against a ballot paper. The assembled company cheers its approval, and a minister joyfully announces that their political party has just gained its newest member. There's a photographic frenzy to capture this wonderful moment in Ben's life. Year after year, Ben will be taken to weekly meetings in which he'll be made to listen to speeches and sing songs praising the party leadership. Each week, Ben will be made to join in with an election ritual, lining up at a booth and voting publicly for the party, then sipping celebratory champagne. The same messages will be drilled into Ben as facts, over and over and over and over again. The party leader is always right. Those who rebel against the leader will suffer terrible consequences. Only devoted members will enjoy a good life. The messages will be further reinforced when Ben is sent to a conviction school, with curriculums designed to keep the students' political convictions in line with the party ideology. At school, as with all other public spaces, he'll be made to wear party colours. As his reasoning skills develop, some of what Ben hears about the leader will seem nonsensical, contradictory, even hypocritical. At first, he'll voice these problems unselfconsciously, but he'll be reminded that the party is perfect, so his criticisms must be wrong. He'll further be accused of sacrilege and warned of harsh consequences for such talk. Ben will feel guilty, scared, and isolated. Critical thoughts about his party will now arouse anxiety in him. He'll learn to dismiss his misgivings as the product of his own ignorance. Before long, he'll learn to block them out altogether. Conversely, he'll learn that compliance gets rewarded. When he does as is told, affirms his political loyalty, raises funds for the party, and so on, he'll be showered with approval and praise, strongly encouraging more of the same behaviours and deepening his sense of identity as a party member. In his 13th year, in a special public ceremony, Ben will confirm his lifelong commitment to the party leadership, promising always to campaign and vote for the party, and affirming that he makes these vows entirely of his own free will. Thomas and Uma will look on with pride, thrilled that their son made the right choice. They will genuinely believe they gave their son a choice. I suspect very few of us would have any difficulty recognizing this hypothetical scenario as abusive. I suspect that if politicians tried to encourage this kind of childhood induction into their parties, there would be huge public outrage. So why is it that many of us will accept all of the above abuse when it comes to religion? The induction of babies as party members, the manipulation of children through endlessly repeated promises, threats, rhetoric, and rituals they're not equipped to evaluate or resist. The further encroachment on children through schools, which should be places of education, not proselytization. How is it possible to hold two such wildly conflicting sets of attitudes towards the same phenomenon of child indoctrination? Protective towards the child in regard to politics, protective towards the indoctrinator in regard to religion. Child religious indoctrination stands out as one of the most systematic, self-perpetuating forms of abuse humans perpetrate on others. I want to go through some of the arguments put to me over the years by its defenders. With each one, I invite the viewer to reflect on how legitimate that argument would seem if it was submitted in support of Ben's political indoctrination. I'll also be presenting a thought experiment that might help bring the point home. Over the years, some apologists have argued that indoctrinate is just another word for teach. Well, open a dictionary, and yes, under indoctrinate, you'll find the verb's archaic definition of teach or instruct. But the modern usage means to teach someone to accept a set of beliefs uncritically, which is a very different business. And it's the business religious indoctrinators are in, where religious beliefs are taught to children as truth, deeply colouring their view of reality, and where reactions to criticism range from expressions of disapproval to physical punishment to threats of eternal damnation. Religious indoctrination actively encourages ignorance, unlike teaching, which encourages knowledge. For example, it discourages the investigation of competing religions. Some children are simply not told about their existence. Some will hear competing religions explicitly denounced as corrupt and will be forbidden to talk about them. Obviously, if children were taught without bias about all religions from the get-go, they might not be so easily herded into the one laid out for them. To those who want to characterize religious indoctrination as teaching, imagine a school where the drama teachers only ever discuss the works of Harold Pinter to the exclusion of all other playwrights, where the music teachers proclaim Sergei Prokofiev as the true composer, dismissing any others as corrupt. where the maths teachers threatened to behead students who draw cartoons of Blaise Pascal. Would you call that teaching? More to the point, would you send your child there? Indoctrination does not just mean teach. Indoctrinators sometimes claim they're performing a service for the child. I've had Christian apologists tell me they're helping the child find its Christian identity. Paints a philanthropic picture, doesn't it? It's as if there's some precious Christian identity hidden deep inside the child that it'll struggle to find by itself. So, the indoctrinator kindly steps in to offer assistance. But what would we think of political indoctrinators who claim they were helping the child find its Democrat identity or its conservative identity? Would it seem like they were doing the child a service, or themselves? What if adults said they were helping the child find its accountant identity, its heterosexual identity, its violinist identity, its stamp collector identity? We don't help children find their identity by imposing identities on them of our own choosing. We help by exposing them to the rich variation and complexity of human life, educating them about all their options, and letting them discover their own identity. Indoctrination is not an act of philanthropy. Neither is it an act of love. On the 2nd of February 2015, going home from school, a 6-year-old boy from Missouri was reportedly coaxed into a pickup truck by a 23-year-old man. According to news accounts, the boy was then told he'd never see his family again and would be nailed to the wall of a shed, and threatened with a gun when he wouldn't stop crying. When they reached their destination, the boy was reportedly tied up, taken to a basement, partially stripped by a woman, and told he could be sold into sex slavery. The twist? The woman was his aunt. The man was her co-worker. Together with the boy's mother and grandmother, they felt the boy was too trusting around strangers, so they staged the kidnapping to teach him not to talk to people he didn't know. When the boy told a teacher about his experience, he was taken into protective custody. A lawyer representing the adults stated that their actions were born out of an intense and sincere love for the child and the desire to protect him from others by teaching him to protect himself. The adults were charged with various offences, including abuse of a child, kidnapping, and felonious restraint. Some apologists cite their personal fear for their child's soul as a justification for inspiring anxiety and terror in their children, with threats of exclusion from paradise and banishment to a realm of unending torture. Both the Missouri abduction defense and this religious indoctrination defense show how overprotective feelings can easily lead to destructive actions when individuals become so fixated on averting some perceived danger that they don't consider what damage they themselves might be doing in the process. It's not a loving act to hold a child so tight you crush its bones. In the case of both the Missouri abduction and religious indoctrination, alternative, non-abusive courses of action exist. The Missouri abductors could have used role-play games, getting the boy to fend off various approaches by strangers. They could have taught him a code word only given to trusted strangers. They could have asked for advice from teachers, psychologists, child protection agencies, even the police. A range of non-abusive options were available. Likewise, indoctrination isn't the only option available if you want to convince your child of your religious beliefs. A non-abusive alternative is simple argumentation. Let your child learn about all religions and the option of choosing none. Teach it without preference. Take it to a range of services conducted by different religions. Take it to a humanist assembly to show that fellowship isn't the exclusive province of religions. Let your child learn about logic and logical fallacies, about syllogistic reasoning, about soundness and validity. Give it practice to build its competence and confidence in legitimate argumentation. Let your child learn about manipulation through emotional appeals and displays of raw conviction, so that it learns to see through to the substance of the underlying claims. Teach it about all the psychological biases we humans possess that can affect the way we process information and ideas. In short, do everything you can to help equip your child with critical thinking skills and immunize it against exploitation. Then, make your case for your religion. Have an honest exchange with your child, presenting all the reasons you think it should believe what you believe. And now comes the important part. Let your child think for itself. Those who are confident they have good reasons for their religious beliefs should have no problem using argumentation instead of indoctrination. Those who are not confident they have good reasons shouldn't be contemplating indoctrination or argumentation. Their best plan is to try and figure out why they themselves hold beliefs they can't substantiate. Many argue that religious indoctrination teaches the child moral values. This instantly falls flat on its face when we ask, can children be taught moral values without indoctrination? The answer is yes. To justify indoctrination as an acceptable method of teaching moral values, the apologist would have to show that the invasive and coercive tactics used in indoctrination were necessary to get the job done. The fact that these tactics are not necessary makes them excessive. Now, that's all I actually need to say to debunk this defense. But like indoctrination, I'm going to be excessive. I want to take a deeper look at this claim of teaching moral values. The stamp of divine authorship often gets tacked on to precepts like don't lie, don't steal, treat others as we'd be treated. But all these rules of thumb have secular roots. They work because they offer ideas on personal boundaries and personal bonding that help social creatures coexist. I call them rules of thumb, not moral absolutes as dogmatic religions like to present them, because the fact is they shouldn't always be followed. Lying can be a moral act where it protects people from persecution. Even the golden rule doesn't always hold. If I enjoy confrontations, it doesn't mean I should go around treating others in a confrontational way. Religions are not the source of any moral value, but frequently the source of immoral ones. In Christianity's Bible, we find the Christian creator God, Yahweh, depicted ordering execution for picking up sticks on the wrong day and for sons who resist their parents. Humans are instructed to burn to death any priest's daughter who becomes a sex worker, and to stone to death any woman shown not to be a virgin on her wedding night. Biblical punishments range from the overblown to the inadequate to the bizarre, such as stoning an ox to death for goring a human. Throughout history, humans have been killed in excessively sadistic ways by groups ranging from drug cartels to religious communities to governments as a warning to others. But what can the stoning of an ox teach the ox community? This is bloodlust, a very human phenomenon, a very biblical phenomenon, but not a moral one. It's been put to me that belief in gods is in itself a moral value because it adds the weight of supernatural authority to moral instruction, helping to ensure the individual's moral compliance. But belief in gods adds weight to any instruction, moral or immoral. Instructions to withhold medical treatment from children, instructions to mutilate their genitals. Beliefs that help to ensure compliance to any instruction have no intrinsic moral value. In defending indoctrination, some people cite the sincerity of their beliefs. The argument posits that if someone believes something sincerely, then they should be free to act in accordance with that belief. For those who don't quite grasp it, let's see the principle in action. Vivian gets a job at a bank. On her first day, she refuses to serve Asian customers. When they complain to her manager that they want her sacked, Vivian reveals that she believes Asians are an inferior slave race who don't deserve money. Her manager is outraged. But then Vivian tells him her beliefs are sincere and have been held by her family for generations. Hearing this, he suddenly realizes there's no problem after all. Vivian keeps her job, and her manager puts up a sign by her desk saying, "No Asians," so she'll never be put in this awkward position again. Make sense now? This is the kind of convoluted nonsense you get into when beliefs are indulged on the basis of sincerity rather than content. Sincerely held beliefs has become a buzz phrase in religious discourse, designed to bypass objections to unreasonable, selfish, and abusive behaviors. But it has no more substance than the plea of the child who complains to its parent, "But I really want it." Some apologists claim indoctrinated children remain free to think. Some of them reject the power of indoctrination altogether, suggesting children will grow up to believe whatever they want anyway. How disingenuous can you get? Indoctrinators know full well that if they succeed in dominating the child's mind in the first few years, there's every chance the beliefs they implant will stick. It's spelled out in the familiar vow attributed to both Aristotle and Jesuit missionary Francis Xavier. "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." This statement shows a clear understanding that these first few years offer an opportunity like no other. In these early years, children are developing their conceptual models of how the world works. If ideas are injected at this stage, they'll stand a great chance of becoming an essential part of how the individual views reality. Injecting ideas in a child's mind is child's play. All kinds of outlandish stories can be presented as facts by adults, and they'll be believed, with the total trust typical of infancy. Freedom to think requires the ability to think, to appraise what you're told. Very young children are incapable of this. Evidence that they're later becoming capable comes when they start asking awkward questions, showing they're not merely swallowing what they're being handed, but beginning to process the material critically. But as I've already noted, indoctrination demands uncritical acceptance. These questions are not welcomed, and indoctrinators use a range of power-based manipulations and punitive measures to silence them, including warnings about blasphemy. These induce guilt and anxiety in the child, and very effectively stop thought. So much for being free to think. Having groomed the child's mind to accept the religious ideology, the indoctrinator can now exploit a well-documented human quirk, the desire for consistency. I explore this phenomenon in depth in my video Bending Truth. Humans have a powerful aversion to contradictions. When we experience two conflicting beliefs or ideas, one will have to be distorted or denied in some way to resolve that conflict. And, unfortunately, research shows that the outcome has little to do with a concern for truth. What we strive for is consistency. And when we have a heavy personal investment in one of the contradictory ideas, the outcome is loaded from the start. The police knock at Karen's door. They've come to arrest her son on several counts of murder. Karen is faced with two contradictory ideas: her son's alleged guilt and her belief in his innocence. We could think of these ideas like boxes. Karen has a ton of investment in the innocent box, years of complex memories and experiences, and intense feelings of love and protectiveness. In contrast, she has no investment in the guilty box. Karen doesn't know any details yet, but dismisses the whole thing as police incompetence. She knows her son. Karen's sure she can provide an alibi, but when she looks through her calendar, she sees her son was out on hunting trips with a friend on all of the murder dates. She puts it down to coincidence. In court, a victim who got away identifies her son as his attacker, but she knows the man's lying or mistaken. She knows her son. Various videos are found on her son's computer in which he appears with his hunting buddy, who's seen torturing and killing animals. Karen is shocked, but it's obviously all down to her son's friend. Then more videos are found. Both boys are clearly seen torturing and killing the murder victims and laughing at their work. Karen can't make sense of what she's seeing, but she knows there must be some explanation. She knows her son. When we become heavily invested in a belief, we don't just happily give it up when we're faced with inconsistent facts. We're much more likely to reject the facts to preserve our belief. Hence, the Jesuits' confident assertion. Indoctrination installs an ideology in the child's brain with muscular connections to major areas of its life, including its sense of identity at every level: self, family, community, for some, nationality. The child will then automatically defend this ideology against any conflicting ideas, without even knowing why. In fact, indoctrination conditions the child with a gamut of reflex responses, automatic, knee-jerk emotions, attitudes, and behaviors that aren't even consciously processed. Responses like automatic compliance, denial, anxiety, guilt, fear, judgments about other groups. An indoctrinated child is no more free to think than a child whose parents have convinced it there are invisible monsters waiting for it outside the house is free to walk out the front door. Some of us do manage to break the psychological hold of the ideologies thrust on us in childhood, often because some conflicting idea has somehow managed to work its way through our defenses, and like a pebble in a shoe, we can't quite shake it loose. When we look to our ideology for answers, we start noticing flaws we never spotted before. They begin to multiply. Before we know it, the ideology is cracking apart, then flying apart. In regard to my own experience of this, I've often said it was like throwing a rock through a spider's web. The foundations of reality were ripped apart, leaving me in a state of limbo. It can take time to recover from such all-encompassing disillusionment, but when eventually we feel ready to face the task of rebuilding our world, piece by piece, there are consolations. We get the chance to lay better foundations, replacing dogmatic certainty, mindless compliance, and emotional thinking with honest doubt, mindful resistance, and critical thinking. Some of us will even get to see our own children grow up unshackled by indoctrination, leaving them genuinely free to think. When assessing whether an activity is abusive or not, it's sometimes difficult to get outside our habitual ways of thinking. Sometimes an abuse has become so normalized that even if part of us understands intellectually the injustice of what's being described, Somehow, we just can't get worked up about it. Certain thought experiments can sometimes give us an insight into our rationalizations, even if only a brief glimpse. One of them is the veil of ignorance, proposed by moral and political philosopher John Rawls. He suggested a hypothetical scenario where we exist outside of a society and have to decide what kind of governing principles we'd be prepared to accept. These might focus on divisions of labor, allocation of resources, the granting of rights. The catch is, we don't know what attributes we'll have when we enter the society. What sex, skin color, nationality, natural abilities, inherited wealth, and so on. They're hidden behind the veil of ignorance. What this does is remove our self-interest. Any personal meaning we might have attached to these features is stripped away. Rawls suggested that a just society was one we'd be prepared to enter at random. So, I invite the viewer to imagine the following two societies. Society A and Society B each contain the same range of religions. There are Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, Wiccans, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and so on. There are the same denominations we see in our world today, from moderate to fundamentalist. Christian could mean Amish, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and so on. Society A runs on childhood indoctrination. Here, children are considered members of their parents' religion at birth. They're taught to accept this religion as the truth, which in the overwhelming majority of cases will result in their lifelong allegiance. Meanwhile, Society B runs on childhood education. Here, children are informed about all religions without preference or manipulation, and left to decide which, if any, they wish to join. In which of these two societies would you be more comfortable being randomly born to parents of any religious group? The veil of ignorance removes self-interest. It actually does so simply by reminding us of how every single one of us came into this world. We didn't choose characteristics like our sex, skin color, nationality. Something else we didn't choose was our religion. But unlike the characteristics I've just mentioned, we should have had control of this one. But that control gets taken away from us when we're assigned the religion of our parents at birth and taught to accept its ideology as truth. We then develop a deep familiarity, connection, and loyalty to that religion, and we forget how utterly arbitrary it was that we happened to be born to parents of this religion. We may even think how lucky we were to be born to parents of the true religion, and not to parents of any of those other false religions. Child indoctrination is an act of subjugation, colonizing a human brain in its most impressionable state with an ideology it's simply not equipped to process. An ideology that will extend a far reach over the child's life, even down to choice of life partner. Signing up to such ideologies needs to be a matter of informed consent, not power-based child coercion that bypasses consent generation after generation. We wouldn't abide it in politics, we shouldn't abide it in religion. We need to put an end to this inexcusable practice of grooming minds.